The golden cage. Olivia Reed adjusted the pearls at her neck, a gift from her husband that felt more like a collar with each passing day. The reflection staring back at her in the bathroom mirror looked polished but hollow, her hazel eyes dulled by years of careful composure. Downstairs, the sounds of the dinner party Richard had insisted on hosting echoed through their mansion in the hills of San Francisco. "Darling," Richard's voice carried up the stairs with practiced charm. "Everyone's asking for you." She took a steadying breath. "Coming?" she called back, her voice light and pleasant, the perfect corporate wife tone she had perfected over 8 years of marriage. Richard Blackwood stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 42, he was 14 years her senior and never let her forget the favor he'd done by marrying someone with potential rather than someone from his social circle. "There she is," he announced as she descended, his hand possessively finding the small of her back. "The lovely Mrs. Blackwood finally gracing us with her presence." His fingers dug slightly into her silk dress, a private warning that she was late by his standards. The room of tech executives and investors smiled appreciatively, seeing only the perfect power couple, the brilliant investment banker and his beautiful, quiet wife. "Olivia, darling, tell Jeffrey about that little charity you volunteer for," Richard prompted, steering her toward a gray-haired venture capitalist. "She's so passionate about helping underprivileged children," he explained, though the program focused on teaching sustainable design to teens from low-income areas, a detail Richard never bothered to remember. As the night wore on, Olivia performed her role flawlessly. She laughed at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions, and deflected any inquiries about her own aspirations. Once she had been a promising design student at Parsons, before Richard had convinced her that supporting his career was more important than pursuing her own hobby. "My wife makes the best hostess," Richard boasted to the room, his arm draped around her shoulders. "I always tell her she doesn't need a career when she's so good at this." Several guests chuckled while others shifted uncomfortably. Olivia maintained her smile, though it no longer reached her eyes. Later that night, as the last guest departed, Richard loosened his tie with a satisfied sigh. "Another successful evening. Thompson is going to invest. That commission alone will cover your shopping for the next year." He chuckled at his own joke. "I'm glad it went well," Olivia said quietly, gathering crystal glasses from the coffee table. "Leave those for the housekeeper," Richard waved dismissively. "You know what I could use right now?" His eyes traveled over her suggestively. Not really, seeing her just claiming what he considered his property. "I have a headache," she said, the only form of resistance she still attempted. His expression hardened. "Fine. I have emails to send anyway." He turned toward his home office without another glance. "Oh, and we're having dinner with the Parkers tomorrow. Wear the blue dress I bought you. Janet Parker always notices these things." Alone in the kitchen, Olivia placed the glasses carefully in the sink. She glanced at her reflection in the window, a ghost of herself staring back from the darkness. In the early days, Richard had seemed like her champion, encouraging her to leave her small-town roots behind for a life of luxury. Now at 35, she realized the price had been her voice, her dreams, her identity. She pulled her phone from a hidden pocket and opened an encrypted email account Richard knew nothing about. There were 3 new messages from her manufacturer, in Portugal, her sustainable fabric supplier, and her quiet but growing customer base. A small spark ignited in her eyes as she began to respond, her fingers flying across the screen. Olivia Reed Designs existed in a parallel universe to Mrs. Richard Blackwood's life, a universe where she was still herself. Seeds of change. The basement studio was Olivia's sanctuary, a space Richard never bothered to visit. Too dusty. He'd complained the one time she'd tried to show him her work area years ago. His disinterest had become her greatest asset. Morning. Light filtered through the small windows as Olivia cut patterns from a roll of bamboo silk. Her collection was coming together, sustainable luxury wear that transformed from day to evening with clever design elements. She checked her watch. She had 3 hours before she needed to prepare for another of Richard's business lunches. Her phone buzzed with a notification. A major sustainable fashion blog had featured her convertible jacket dress, and orders were flooding in. Olivia sat back on her stool, momentarily overwhelmed. What had started 3 years ago as a quiet rebellion, a single design sold on an artisan marketplace under a pseudonym, had grown into something substantial. "Ms. Reed?" Her assistant Zoe's voice came through the phone. "The manufacturer in Portugal confirmed they can scale up production for the fall line, and that boutique in Copenhagen wants to place a standing order." Olivia had hired Zoe 6 months ago when managing everything alone became impossible. The young woman worked remotely, believing Olivia was a widow working from home. A necessary fiction to protect her growing business. "That's wonderful news, Zoe. Tell them yes, and send them our sustainability requirements." Olivia's voice changed when she spoke about her business. Confident, authoritative, nothing like the soft-spoken Mrs. Blackwood. "Already done. Oh, and your application for the Sustainable Design Innovation Award has been accepted. They want you to attend the ceremony in Milan next month." Olivia's heart sank. "I can't go to Milan, send my regrets. But Ms. Reed, this is huge for the brand, can't you?" "I'll think about it," Olivia conceded, knowing it was impossible. Richard would never allow such a trip without him, and he could never know about her business. Upstairs, she heard the front door slam. Richard wasn't supposed to be home until evening. She quickly covered her work and locked the basement door behind her. "Olivia!" Richard's voice boomed through the house. "Where are you?" She found him in the kitchen pouring himself a scotch despite it being barely noon. "I'm here. Is everything all right?" "Morgan pulled his investment," Richard snapped, his face flushed with anger. "Says he's going with Westfield instead. Fucking traitor after all I've done for him." "I'm sorry to hear that," Olivia said cautiously. "What were you doing in the basement?" he asked suddenly, eyes narrowing. "Just some organizing. You know how the housekeeper never gets to it." Her heart hammered in her chest. Richard downed his scotch. "Whatever. I need you to call Janet Parker. We're having dinner with them tonight. I need to secure Stephen's backing before Westfield gets to him too." "Tonight? But it's our anniversary," Olivia ventured. Richard stared at her blankly. "Is it? Well, this is more important. Wear something impressive. I need you looking perfect." That evening, seated at the Parkers' opulent dining table, Olivia smiled and nodded as Richard recounted his business triumphs, carefully omitting the day's setback. "And what about you, Olivia?" Janet Parker asked during a lull. Richard mentioned, "You used to be a designer. Do you still dabble?" Before Olivia could answer, Richard laughed. "Olivia has more important things to focus on than fashion sketches, don't you, darling?" "Actually," Janet continued, "I saw the most amazing sustainable collection online yesterday. The designer uses these ingenious transformation techniques. Reed Designs, I think it was called." Olivia nearly choked on her wine. "How interesting," she managed. "It's becoming quite popular in my circle," Janet added. "Very exclusive." Richard waved dismissively. "Sustainable fashion is just a passing trend. Real luxury never goes out of style." He patted Olivia's hand condescendingly. "My wife understands that, don't you, dear? She has excellent taste in what really matters." Later that night, as Richard slept, Olivia slipped back to her studio. Her hands trembled as she opened her laptop to check the sales dashboard. The exposure from the blog had quadrupled her daily revenue. At this rate, her secret business would soon be too big to hide. She opened a new document and began drafting a business plan for expansion. Beside it, she started another file, a personal exit strategy. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond Richard's controlling grip. A life where Olivia Reed, not Mrs. Blackwood, made the decisions. Her company's valuation had just crossed into 7 figures, all carefully hidden in offshore accounts Richard knew nothing about. The seeds she had planted in quiet defiance were beginning to bear fruit, and soon she would need to decide whether to harvest them or watch them wither under her husband's shadow. Olivia looked at her reflection in the computer screen, tired eyes but a determined set to her jaw. She wasn't the same naive young woman Richard had married. Somewhere along the way, buried beneath the perfect wife facade, she had become something else entirely. A businesswoman, a creator, a force to be reckoned with. She just needed the courage to let the world, and Richard, see it. Breaking point, the photograph slid across Olivia's phone screen, sent by a friend who thought she should know. There was Richard, his arm wrapped intimately around a young blonde woman outside a hotel in Chicago, a city where he'd claimed to be closing an important business deal alone. The woman couldn't have been more than 25. Olivia set her phone down carefully, surprised by her own calm. This wasn't the first affair, but somehow seeing the evidence so plainly triggered something different this time. Not pain, but clarity. "Will you be attending the Henderson Gala this weekend?" Zoe asked through the speakerphone, unaware of the moment unfolding in Olivia's studio. "The Sustainable Fashion Council members will all be there, and they're specifically hoping to meet you." Olivia stared at her latest design, a flowing evening gown made from recycled ocean plastic that looked like liquid silver. It deserved to be seen. She deserved to be seen. "Yes," she said suddenly. "Book the ticket." "Really?" Zoe couldn't hide her surprise. "That's wonderful. I'll arrange everything." That evening, Richard arrived home late, reeking of expensive perfume that wasn't Olivia's. He loosened his tie and dropped his briefcase in the hallway, expecting it to be picked up and put away as always. "We need to talk," Olivia said from the darkened living room, startling him. "Christ, Olivia, why are you sitting in the dark?" He flipped on the light, revealing her seated in an armchair, composed and still. "I'm going to New York this weekend for the Henderson Gala." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "No, you're not. We have dinner with the Wilsons on Saturday. I've already booked my ticket." His laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Don't be ridiculous. Cancel it. You know how important the Wilsons are to my new venture." "I'm going, Richard." Her voice remained steady. "And when I return, I'd like you to move your things into the guest room." His amusement morphed into anger. "What the hell are you talking about?" Olivia held up her phone, displaying the photograph. "Chicago looks lovely this time of year." Richard's face hardened. "You're spying on me now?" "A mutual friend thought I should know where my husband spends his business trips. She's nobody, a momentary distraction." He ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, transitioning seamlessly from anger to practiced contrition. "You know how stressful work has been lately. It didn't mean anything. Like the others didn't mean anything." Olivia stood up. "I'm going to New York, and when I return, we're going to discuss separation terms." Richard's facade cracked. "Separation? Have you lost your mind? What exactly do you think you'll do without me? Go back to sketching little dresses in community college?" His laugh was cruel. "Look around you, Olivia. Everything you have is because of me." "Not everything," she whispered. "You signed a prenup, remember? You'll get the standard settlement and nothing more. Where will you live? How will you support yourself? Your family can barely keep their lights on in that trailer park you came from." Each word was designed to cut deep, to remind her of her perceived worthlessness without him. Once they would have sent her retreating in tears. Now they strengthened her resolve. "I'll manage," she said simply. The New York Gala transformed everything. For the first time, Olivia Reed stood publicly as the designer behind her brand, wearing her ocean plastic gown that captured the attention of everyone in the room. Fashion editors requested interviews, boutique owners sought exclusive arrangements, sustainability advocates praised her innovation. When she returned to San Francisco, Richard was waiting, his fury barely contained. "You've made your point," he said, blocking her path as she carried her suitcase upstairs. "I'll be more discreet in the future." "That's not what this is about anymore," Olivia replied, stepping around him. "I've contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from her this week." Richard grabbed her arm. "Don't threaten me, Olivia. You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." She pulled free. For the first time in years. The following weeks became a cold war. Richard alternated between attempts at reconciliation and vicious threats. He froze their joint accounts, convinced she would quickly come crawling back when reality set in. Instead, Olivia continued working from her studio, unfazed by his financial manipulations. "You're making a mistake," Richard hissed one morning as they passed in the hallway like strangers. "You'll be nothing without the Blackwood name." Olivia smiled faintly. "Actually, Richard, I think it's the other way around." The divorce filing hit Richard's desk on a Tuesday morning. By afternoon, his lawyer had called with reassurances that Olivia would get nothing beyond the prenup's basic provisions. Richard's smug voice echoed through the house that evening as he spoke on the phone. "She'll regret this little rebellion," he told someone, laughing. "Wait until she realizes she's walking away from everything for some pathetic midlife crisis. I give her 2 months before she's begging to come back." In the basement studio, Olivia packed the last of her designs into garment bags. Tomorrow would bring the courtroom, the confrontation, the revelation. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was clear. The golden cage had finally been unlocked. All she had to do now was step through the door. The revelation, the courthouse, loomed before Olivia, its stone facade imposing against the clear September sky. She adjusted her cream pantsuit, one of her own designs with subtle architectural details that spoke of quiet confidence rather than Richard's preferred showy luxury. "Remember, let me do the talking," advised her attorney, Denise Walker, a formidable woman whose specialty was representing women in high-asset divorces. "Blackwood's team will try to provoke you." Olivia nodded, clutching her leather portfolio. Inside were the documents that would change everything: bank statements, valuation reports, and acquisition offers for Reed Designs that had been arriving with increasing frequency since the New York gala. Richard was already seated at the EUA plaintiff's table when they entered, looking immaculate in an Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Beside him sat his attorney, Winston Palmer, known for his aggressive tactics and perfect record protecting wealthy men's assets in divorce proceedings. "Olivia," Richard acknowledged with a smirk, "you look determined." His eyes swept over her outfit dismissively. "Thrift shop chic?" She didn't respond, taking her seat at the defendant's table. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s named Judge Eleanor Mercer, entered and called the proceedings to order. "We're here for the preliminary asset disclosure in Blackwood vs. Reed," she announced, reviewing the file before her. "I understand there's a prenuptial agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor." Palmer stood with a flourish. "A valid binding agreement that Mrs. Blackwood signed willingly, limiting her claim to a fixed settlement regardless of the duration of marriage or assets acquired during that time." "Ms. Walker?" Judge Mercer turned to Olivia's attorney. "We acknowledge the existence of the prenuptial agreement, Your Honor," Denise stated calmly. "However, we contend that it applies only to assets acquired through Mr. Blackwood's business ventures or joint marital assets. It does not cover independent business interests developed solely by my client, without any contribution from Mr. Blackwood." Richard leaned over to whisper something to his attorney, his expression one of amusement. Palmer nodded reassuringly before addressing the court. "Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to circumvent a legally binding agreement. Mrs. Blackwood has no independent business interests of any significance. She's been a homemaker throughout the marriage with no meaningful income source." "Is that so?" Denise opened her portfolio. "We've submitted our financial disclosures as required. I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit C." The clerk distributed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. Richard took his with a bored expression that quickly transformed as he scanned the pages. "These documents confirm that my client is the sole owner and founder of Reed Sustainable Designs LLC," Denise continued, "an independently established company currently valued at $27.4 million based on last quarter's earnings and recent acquisition offers, which are detailed in Exhibit D." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Richard's face had drained of color. "This is absurd," Palmer blustered. "These figures must be fabricated. Mrs. Blackwood has no business experience or—" "The company's financial records have been verified by 2 independent accounting firms," Denise interrupted smoothly. "Additionally, We've included statements from Vogue Business, Forbes Women, and the Sustainable Fashion Council, confirming Ms. Reed's position as CEO and lead designer of what they're calling the most innovative sustainable luxury brand of the decade. Judge Mercer reviewed the documents with raised eyebrows. These appear to be in order, Mr. Palmer. Does your client wish to contest the valuation? Richard stared at Olivia as if seeing her for the first time. This isn't possible, he said, his voice barely audible. You've been, what, running a company from our house? From the basement studio you never visited, Olivia replied quietly. For the past 5 years. While you were belittling her design aspirations as little hobbies, Mr. Blackwood, Denise added, my client was building an internationally recognized brand that's now being courted by luxury conglomerates with offers exceeding $50 million for majority acquisition. The courtroom fell silent. Richard's attorney frantically flipped through the disclosure documents. There must be some mistake, Palmer insisted. Mr. Blackwood had no knowledge of this alleged business. That's precisely our point, Denise smiled. Mr. Blackwood had no knowledge, provided no funding, offered no support, and made no contribution whatsoever to Reed Designs. The company exists entirely outside the scope of the prenuptial agreement, which I'll remind the court specifically covers only assets acquired through joint effort or matrimonial partnership. Judge Mercer studied Richard's stunned expression before turning to Olivia. Ms. Reed, is it your testimony that your husband was unaware of your business activities? Yes, Your Honor, Olivia confirmed. Mr. Blackwood repeatedly discouraged my design aspirations and insisted I focus solely on supporting his career. I built my company in private, using my inheritance from my grandmother as seed funding. Richard found his voice at last. This is ridiculous. She's been living in my house, enjoying my lifestyle, while generating annual revenues exceeding your own for the past 2 years, Denise interjected, sliding another document across the table, as these tax returns demonstrate. Judge Mercer suppressed what might have been a smile. I think we need to revise our approach to these proceedings, she said. Mr. Palmer, in light of these disclosures, does your client wish to reconsider his position regarding the division of assets? Palmer leaned in to consult with Richard, whose face had twisted into an expression of mingled rage and disbelief. Additionally, Your Honor, Denise continued, my client is prepared to relinquish any claim to the marital home and other joint properties in exchange for Mr. Blackwood dropping all claims against her business interests and agreeing to an expedited, uncontested divorce. You planned this all along, Richard hissed across the table at Olivia. While I was supporting you, you were secretly supporting myself, Olivia finished for him, and building something meaningful in the process. Judge Mercer tapped her gavel. I suggest both parties take a 15-minute recess to discuss these developments with counsel. As they filed out of the courtroom, Richard grabbed Olivia's arm. You won't get away with this. I made you who you are. For the first time in years, Olivia looked directly into her husband's eyes without fear or hesitation. No, Richard. You never knew who I was. That was your biggest mistake. New horizons. 3 years passed like the turning of seasons, each one bringing new growth and unexpected beauty. The oceanfront house in Monterey had become Olivia's sanctuary. Large windows capturing the dramatic coastline, a spacious studio, overlooking the water, and a garden that flourished under her careful attention. Reed Sustainable Designs had expanded beyond her wildest dreams. After declining multiple acquisition offers, Olivia had instead opened a design academy focused on empowering women from disadvantaged backgrounds to enter the sustainable fashion industry. Her designs now graced red carpets and magazine covers, celebrated not just for their beauty, but for the environmental innovation behind each piece. The investors are waiting in the conference room, her executive assistant Theo announced, poking his head into Olivia's office at company headquarters in San Francisco. And that journalist from Business Insider wants to confirm your interview about the mentor program. Olivia smiled, closing her sketchbook. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, and yes to the interview, but make sure they understand the focus is on the students, not me. The morning sunlight illuminated the awards lining her office walls, Recognition not just for design excellence but for the company's pioneering manufacturing practices and ethical labor standards. Her favorite wasn't the prestigious fashion awards but a simple framed letter from a teenage girl in Detroit who had found purpose in Olivia's design program. The divorce had concluded swiftly after that day in court. Richard, faced with the undeniable evidence of Olivia's success, had accepted her terms with cold fury rather than prolonged public humiliation. Rumor had it he had told colleagues she'd tricked him, that she was cold-hearted and calculating. Olivia found she didn't care what he said anymore. After the meeting with investors eager to fund the expansion of her academy, Olivia decided to walk to her lunch appointment. San Francisco's hills challenged her even in comfortable shoes, but she enjoyed the exercise and the chance to observe people wearing her designs in their everyday lives. The restaurant was busy when she arrived, a small, sustainable farm-to-table place that had become her favorite. She spotted her lunch date already seated, Gabriela Martinez, the brilliant environmental scientist whose innovations in fabric recycling had revolutionized Olivia's latest collection. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting," Olivia said, settling into her chair. "Not at all," Gabriela smiled, her warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "I was early as usual." Their conversation flowed easily between business and personal matters, the friendship that had developed between them over the past year deepening with each meeting. Gabriela understood Olivia's passion for sustainability in a way few others did, seeing beyond the fashion to the environmental impact of each choice. "Have you thought more about the seaweed-based textile?" Gabriela asked as they finished their meal. "The latest tests show it biodegrades completely in 30 days. "I've been sketching some ideas," Olivia admitted. "The drape is extraordinary. I think it could work beautifully for a resort collection." As they discussed technical details, Olivia became aware of a commotion near the entrance. A familiar voice rose above the ambient restaurant noise, commanding attention as always. Richard Blackwood stood at the hostess station, accompanied by a woman at least 20 years his junior, who looked uncomfortable in her clearly expensive attire. He hadn't changed much, perhaps a little heavier, his hair grayer at the temples but still radiating that same entitled confidence. "I don't care if you're fully booked," he was saying loudly. "Surely you can find a table for—" He stopped, abruptly, his eyes meeting Olivia's across the room. For a moment neither moved. Then Richard squared his shoulders and deliberately steered his companion toward Olivia's table. "Olivia," he acknowledged with forced casualness, "you're looking well." "Hello, Richard," she replied evenly. "This is my colleague, Dr. Gabriela Martinez." Richard barely glanced at Gabriela. "This is Vanessa," he said, nudging his companion forward. "My fiancée." The young woman smiled nervously. "It's nice to meet you. Richard has told me, well, not much actually." A small, awkward silence followed. "I read about your company in Forbes," Richard finally said, an edge to his voice. "Quite the success story, though I always knew you had potential, of course." Olivia simply nodded, recognizing the desperate attempt to rewrite history. "Congratulations on your engagement. We're getting married in the Maldives next month," he continued, his tone suggesting this should impress her. "Before they sink into the ocean, as all these climate activists keep warning." Gabriela raised an eyebrow but remained tactfully silent. "Actually, our new research center is doing some promising work with the Maldivian government on coastline preservation," Olivia remarked. "You should visit the local textile cooperative while you're there. They're doing extraordinary work." Richard seemed momentarily thrown by her composed response. "Yes, well, we should be going. Our reservation at Luciano's is in 20 minutes. As they turned to leave, Vanessa hesitated. "I love your designs," she said quietly to Olivia. "I have 3 of your dresses. They make me feel powerful." A genuine smile crossed Olivia's face. "That's exactly why I make them." After they departed, Gabriela leaned forward. "So that's the famous ex-husband? He seems exactly the same." Olivia finished for her. "And that's the point, isn't it? He hasn't grown or changed. He's still defining himself by appearances and possessions." "While you've built something meaningful," Gabriela observed. Later that evening, as Olivia drove back to her Monterey home, she reflected on the encounter. There had been a time when seeing Richard would have sent her spiraling into anxiety, questioning her worth and decisions. Now she felt only a distant compassion for the man who had once controlled her life, but never truly known her. The sun was setting over the Pacific as she turned onto her driveway, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, another fashion award nomination, this time specifically recognizing environmental innovation. Inside her home, Olivia kicked off her shoes and opened the balcony doors to let in the ocean breeze. On her drawing table lay sketches for her next collection, inspired by ocean conservation. Beside them sat a handwritten letter from a women's shelter in Chicago, thanking her for the workshop she had funded. This was success, not measured in Richard's terms of wealth and status, but in impact, purpose, and authentic self-expression. The woman who had once disappeared behind a perfect wife facade now stood fully in her own light, casting a shadow far longer than she had ever imagined possible. Olivia Reed had never needed rescuing. She had simply needed to recognize the strength that had been there all along, and the courage to let it shine.